What's up, guys? Welcome to the, I don't know why I had to check, but the May 2021 YouTube live show of Tidal Gardens. Welcome. So we are early like normal. I usually like to take this time to do a quick audio and visual check, make sure that everything is working quite right before the actual coral selling stuff starts happening. So if you guys are new to this and don't quite know how the YouTube show works, we're gonna showcase roughly 250 something corals, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more. It depends on how things line up. And the show's gonna go for about 3 hours, but the actual items on the show, the items on the website will stay up till around Tuesday or Wednesday, and then we'll take it all down. You can purchase stuff if you're located in the United States, and you go to tidalgardens.com/live. You'll see an embed of this video, and below that, there's going to be a bunch of numbered items plus thumbnails that we're going to be also going over in video format here. So that's kind of like the broad overview of how these things work. They are all basically regular items that you throw into your shopping cart and check out like usual. If you have never purchased before, there's one thing to keep an eye out on, is that a lot of times our automated emails, for some reason, end up going to the junk mail folder. For some odd reason, a lot of different ISPs do not like our mail server. So that's just something to keep a mental note of. If you're not getting anything back from us, chances are you are getting something back. It's just ending up in the junk mail. Good, thank you guys. Sounds like the audio and video is working out all right. Yeah, Swarf saying audio sounds good, awaits the transition. Yeah, sometimes when I go off of this kind of the loading screen, it gets a little squirrely once we get to the actual corals for a second, but lately it's been behaving. I say that and I'm sure I've completely sabotaged my future. All right. I look forward to seeing you having great success with your new 3D printed plugs. I've been using them for a while now and they look so nice. We've been trying a couple of different things lately. We want to get this very black appearance because a lot of our photography involves having a coral against a black background. And we tried something with a coating that goes over our typical ceramic plugs. And the coating just really wasn't what I was looking for. It had a weird texture to it, which made maintenance a little bit more difficult because we do clean our corals somewhat frequently. And in that process of cleaning, just like the grittiness of that black coating wasn't working out quite so well for us. And if we started to aggressively scrub that black coating off of those plugs, the coating would just come off. So we would end up with this essentially a white ceramic plug with some black junk on top of it that's been scraped up, and so you get this Oreo cookie looking thing. It just doesn't work out, not at all. So we've been experimenting a little bit lately with a 3D printer that we got. I don't really have a lot of experience with 3D printers. One of our guys here, he's been 3D printing stuff for about a year now. He has like a bunch of Ender CR6s and things like that. But I've heard really good things about this 3D printer that's made in the Czech Republic called Prusa. I think it's the guy's name is like Josef Prusa. I don't know how to pronounce it in Czech. But supposedly that's a really good, high quality entry level machine. And so far so good. We've been testing out a lot of these frag plugs that we're making out of PET, and they're nice. They sync. They don't even have a 100% infill, which means that there's a little bit of air still in them. And despite that, they sink just fine. And we've made them thin enough that the stems can still break off easily if you need to break them off. Sometimes people don't like the little stems. And also the disc portion is still thin enough that you can cut it with a saw. Because our first couple of iterations, the PET was too hard for a diamond bandsaw to cut into easily. So the latest iteration can be both cut with a saw, and the bottom little peg can be broken off just with your hands. We will still probably be iterating on that for a good while longer, just to see what we can tweak with this and that. But we can go through so many plugs here, it's not even funny, and we're gonna eventually come up with something that really works well for us. But that's the story with some of the new things with frag plugs. But in the meantime, we also have tens of thousands of our regular ceramic made frag plugs to still go through. I guess it comes down to right tool for the right job. But again, our main impetus is going towards a very black looking plug. That's kind of the goal here. Gabriel Berkey, doing anything special for your mom tomorrow, Than? No, I'm a bad son. I don't have anything planned. I did ask her today, it's like, what do you want? And we don't really want a whole lot of things for like small occasions these days. It's a lot of really circular logic. It's like, yeah, I want to go on a trip, but trips are tiring. So like, why don't we just watch the Travel Channel instead? That type of stuff. So Swarf is saying, that is what I use. Their filament is unreal as well. Yeah, we're not using the official Prusa filament because I think it's twice the price. But I'm sure it's very high. And I think if we were making a higher end product, I would dedicate more of the budget towards better material. But we're talking about frag plugs here. They're basically disposable. Not super disposable, but disposable-ish. George Perez, love your channel. You've taught me a ton. Well, thank you, George. Thank you for watching. Speaking of thank yous, I have to say some thank yous to the Patreon crowd as well as the YouTube membership crowd. So real quick, I have 1 minute and 42 seconds. All right, let's go. Bill Russell, Brandy Camp, Christopher Frame, Jeremy Altman, Alan Jackson, Chuck Admire, Don Bowman, Ernest Wallace Jr., Gene A. Van Voorst, Greg Zimmerman, Gwen Nicodemus, Harkins Aquatics, Keith Singer, Kevin Cortez, Lisa Clow, Puddle Aquatics, Rebecca Hall, Reef Infidel, Rigoberto Rodriguez III, Ryan Kern, Santa Nomine, Scotty D, Skylar Korn, Sue Hemmons, The Classroom Reef, Thomas Tarrant, Tim Garner, and Trevor Joseph Overbeck. And on the YouTube membership side, as of 1 day ago, welcome Jerry Albright, Justin Harden, Joseph Posada, Kev Andrews, Jeremy Place, Hal Scott, 328 Reef, Deidre Zuener, and 2 Please Coral Reefs. Thank you guys so much. What do these fine folks get for their membership? Basically, at this point, a shout out and some free images that they're allowed to use for personal use. But I need to find, and I've said this in many occasions before, but I really do need to find better perks. There's other channels out there that have really cool perks that works for their channel, but doesn't quite work for mine. For example, I've been watching some YouTube reaction videos of people watching movies, and what's kind of cool about theirs is that since they're not able to post like the full movie reaction, they have to like cut everything into tiny snippets. Okay, 1 sec, and here we go. All right, so they cut their videos into really short segments. So if somebody is doing a reaction video to Lord of the Rings, for example, right? It'll be a 5-minute video. And to see like their full reaction, they do a special thing on Patreon, something like that. It's like that would be an actual value add. But I have not figured out something that really works for this channel just yet. But I very much appreciate the support. Tattoo Dancer 91, your coffee looks cold and very weak. I have had 3 coffees this morning, so I really need to calm down on that and dilute it all with the water. I drink an insane amount of water, you guys. I think that's one of the few things that I'm actually doing that's healthy. I probably drink about 120 ounces of water a day, something like that. And yes, that does help. Offer them your used equipment. That is an interesting idea. The only problem is a lot of our stuff doesn't equate to hobbyist scale. For example, I have a skimmer that we don't use anymore. The problem is it's an 8-foot tall RK2 skimmer. So it'll cost a large fortune to ship to somebody. It doesn't really work because I've taken the pump off of it. And who really needs an 8-foot tall skimmer for their home aquarium? I mean, not too often, right? Not too often. And that's an overall problem with a lot of the stuff that we have here. It doesn't make hardly any sense for anybody to have. And nice. I'm glad that the transition went smoothly. I know that there's going to be some new people that don't quite understand what's going on in the whole display. So I'll kind of walk you through everything that's on screen. So right now we're on item number 5. And in the top left corner, you see that little coral with the Kelvin rating that's dialing up from about 6,500 Kelvin to about 18,000 Kelvin. And that is showing a rough estimation on what color this coral will look like under a specific kind of light. So it starts off more daylight looking, and by the end of like the 30 some odd second countdown, it will end up a lot more actinic looking. And we accomplish that with a special effect, so your mileage may vary, but the idea is just to give you an idea of what that transition will look like. Because not everybody keeps their tank at the same color. A lot of times, people keep their tanks very blue. And I guess to a large degree, we keep our tanks here very blue. But personally, I like a more daylight look to a lot of things. It doesn't fluoresce as much, but I do appreciate a lot more of like the natural colors coming through. Whereas there's a couple folks that work here that are addicted to blue and think that blue is the answer to all the world's problems. I mean, I could agree with them, then we would both be wrong. Yeah, so anyway, that's what that is about. Bottom left on the screen, that is how much time per coral that we'll be spending. And you can see, obviously, the number, the price, regular price, and how much of a savings that is reflected. We will be going over about 250 something, give or take. And it's kind of a mishmash. People always ask, like, are you going to go over a section of such and such coral? And I'm like, maybe. We do have like some larger LPS and things of that sort. But a lot of our stuff, for at least the YouTube crowd, tends to trend more towards frags. That tends to be like the thing that's more popular. So that's what you can expect there. Brock B, I subscribe to your methods. Do everything 5 times the size. Spec it out way bigger than you anticipate you'll need. That's a funny thing. I've got a story. So right now we've got a humidity problem. because there's multiple ways that this new building that we're in, there's multiple ways that the new building handles humidity. And humidity is a big issue because I don't want to be growing black mold and having to deal with that, because in a building like this, black mold is not really going to be very easily dealt with. I brought in an HVAC company that has worked. Oh, sorry. I lost my train of thought. So there's two ways that we handle humidity. One is with an air conditioner. The other thing is a bunch of different air exchangers. Now the air exchangers do very well in the wintertime when the outside is dry. So we're swapping our humid inside air with very dry outside air, and the air exchanger itself regulates the temperature. The air conditioner, you guys know what an air conditioner is, condensation coil. A lot of that humidity from the air is taken out. But right now it is about 50 degrees outside and it is swampy as all heck. Like, you cannot mow my lawn right now because of how wet everything is outside. And it rains like 4 days in a row. So it's 100% humidity outside. The air exchangers aren't doing me any favors. We're swapping swampy inside air with swampy outside air. Also, it's 50 degrees. So we're not going to be running an air conditioner when it's 50 degrees. It's too cold. We're in this gray area where nothing we do currently really works. So I brought in an HVAC company to take a look at our situation, and they brought in I guess he's a rep for Desert Air. They make dehumidification systems for serious environments like an indoor pool, which is roughly what we're doing here, is indoor pool. And I told the guy right off the bat, listen, okay, we'll do the song and dance of all the calculations, all the square footage of water. We'll do all the calculations with our current relative humidity, our target relative humidity, all the different temperature gradients, all that. We'll do all that fun stuff, okay? When I see a quote, I want to see what the formula says, and I want to see what double the formula says in terms of what equipment you think we need, because things here change quite substantially. We can't plan for what it's going to look like 3, 4, 5 years from now, because there are major differences from day one to where we are now in how we wanted to put together just the aquariums. And it's entirely likely that by the time that this building is really starting to fill out, there's going to be a lot more water than we ever anticipated. So go ahead and spec out something gigantic from the start. So yes, long story, but we're trying to oversize it as much as possible right now. Even if it's not the most efficient for our current setup, I don't want to look down the road and just lack the capacity. Let's see. Sorry guys, I'm catching up on all the chat. Tattoo Dancer 91. The image seems much sharper, higher resolution than usual. Improved Wi-Fi or maybe a different filming technique. I'm unsure really what changes when it comes to these YouTube shows. I have a feeling that YouTube itself might be doing different compression at any given time. But if anybody is to take credit here, I'm going to go ahead and give credit to Becca. She's the one who actually shot all the video footage that you see. So it's entirely possible on that end that practice makes perfect. And she's now been filming these things for a year now. And it's the little slight technique differences that you just pick up over the course of just doing thousands of shots of this type, that you just get better and better and better at it. Okay. Would a leather coral be a problem to a plating Monty? I had the two next to each other and the Monty was looking really peed off, so I moved it. Wasn't sure if it was the leather doing it. If you have any two corals next to each other, there's a really good chance that there's going to be coral aggression issues. That is one of our issues that we have in just setting up a show like this. We have the corals close to one another, within about 2-3 inches most of the time, and just that distance, occasionally you have class warfare between these types of corals. That's also why we go through like blocks of coral rather than having it completely mixed up. For example, we're going to be going through like an entire set of just zoanthids, because zoanthids to one another aren't particularly aggressive, but then you might start to get into some other corals. For example, some certain LPS like chalices tend to be very aggressive, and so two chalices together might fight like crazy. A chalice next to a brain coral might be very aggressive. We have to be careful of that. So in your tank, a leather and a Monty, yeah, very likely that you're going to have some aggression issues. Harkins. Are there categories of CYPHASTREA? Some have large polyps and some have very small polyps. There might be some differences there, but I think that a lot of it even comes down to what tank that they're in. There's some huge variation that you can get just based on what conditions a certain coral is kept in. One of the guys that helps out here was my former personal trainer, and he's bought a lot of corals from us over the years, and he sells back corals to us. And one time he brought in some calastria, some, what are those things called? Trumpet corals, candy cane corals. And his were every bit of 4 times the size of ours. And I know that he got them from us. It was a matter of just his particular system, how much access to nutrients it has, and how aggressively he's feeding. So usually when I think of like, oh, well, he's feeding it more, usually it's just the flesh that's bigger. But in this case, like the skeleton itself was 4 times the size. Like each individual skeleton of the polyp was so massive, like big bones, right? So would CYPHASTREA be a different subspecies just because of how they look, some of them having bigger polyps than others? It could be less of a taxonomy thing and more of just a specific aquarium thing. There's a lot of variation that can happen with that. Anton Ta. Would Goniopora be an SPS coral because it's in the same family as Porites? Not really. When it comes to like SPS and LPS and stuff, that's a hobbyist thing. That's not really a scientific designation of any kind. There's not a whole lot you can really even glean from saying, oh, that's an SPS versus an LPS. Because a lot of what people attribute, as far as like care differences between the two. So they'll say, okay, SPS need more flow, they need more light, they need cleaner water, yada, yada, yada. But really, there's a lot of SPS, quote unquote SPS, that don't fall into that set of care guidelines. What they're really describing is acropora. And how valuable is that then? Because acropora are practically on their own island as far as care compared to the entire rest of all your corals. They're a very specialized thing. So to kind of have this broad SPS label and to have it borrow all the attributes of literally the most way out there coral genus, it's super unhelpful. I would say that most, if not all, SPS, right? The care requirements resemble very similar large polyp stony corals. Like, for example, a Trichophilia brain. I mean, because if you just think about it, if there was so much of a difference in care requirements between SPS and LPS, you really couldn't keep the two in the same tank. And we all know, or should all know, that that's the furthest thing from the truth. Most corals can be kept together in the same aquarium just fine. There's a little bit of adaptation that needs to happen there. And the one major outlier are going to be like the acropora. So zoanthids and acros, can they be kept together? Yeah, actually. There's even huge overlap there. But there's certain things that are going to want lower flow, lower light, that sort of thing. That's a bit of a ramble, but hopefully you got my point. You need a large dehumidification system, then double it. Yeah. So the one that so they haven't gone through the entire design phase yet, but the one that they were considering requires a 125 amp breaker. Yeah, that's going to be pretty awesome. And what's funny is most of my questions for these guys didn't even involve anything involving the dehumidification process. I was more concerned about how much noise is this thing going to make. Because it's going to be this huge thing. It's going to be so if you guys remember my generator, the size of that thing, this dehumidifier unit is likely going to be bigger than the generator in physical size. It's going to be between 12 to 15 feet long, that sort of thing. It's going to require 125 amp 3-phase breaker. And yeah, that's assuming that it's not going to be bigger. So we shall see. Got a lot of reading to catch up on. Some folks are answering other folks' questions. Thank you very much. Okay. Got caught up there. So Peter Balaj is asking, how much of a problem is coral aggression in a mixed reef? Strangely, I think it's less of a problem than you would have in a coral farm, and I'm not really sure why that is. In people's home aquariums, I think that there is a lot more corals that adapt to that situation and adapt to being in the presence of each other better. Not that there isn't going to be quite a lot of coral aggression, but the consequences of it are muted. I've seen like in some friends' aquariums, there'll be like 2 chalices that are definitely fighting and definitely not happy, but they're growing right next to each other, and then they're even like growing up like against each other. If anything remotely close to that happened in my aquariums, it'd be like boop, and then both corals die. So I don't quite understand what the interaction difference is between his situation and my situation. But there are certainly these things that happen that are kind of inexplicable. So in a coral farming setting like what we deal with here, I have to take special care to give a lot more room to stuff and isolate as much as I can, because it just takes every little tiny interaction to lose a lot of coral, a lot of expensive coral. And that probably does happen still in mixed reefs, but yeah, certain things just don't necessarily translate. I wouldn't go as far as to say, oh, you know, it's not a big deal, you can totally put stuff next to each other. I'm definitely not saying that. but they seem to be a little bit more tolerant. I guess if I was to give any recommendation, I would say give stuff plenty of room to grow. And also it depends on what it is that we're talking about. Like right now we're looking at some zoas, and zoas tend to be pretty docile. If anything, it's their growth rate more so than just how aggressive they are. But there's some corals that are hyper aggressive. For example, the ones that send out sweeper tentacles and things like that. In those cases, you want to probably give it at least 6 to 8 inches away from the next neighbor. We've got some pectinia, which if you know what a pectinia looks like, it's like basically like a hand that looks like this, kind of staghorn shapes. And you wouldn't really think that they would be that aggressive, but they send out sweeper tentacles when they smell something in the water that they don't like. And suddenly their footprint goes from something about the size of your hand to something the size of like a basketball now. And anything in that range is likely to get bombarded with nematocysts. Yeah, Peter is saying pretty much what I just observed also. I see people with mixed reefs have tons of different corals touching without problems. Yeah, I have seen that too. And I've experienced quite the opposite myself. When in doubt, give them as much space as possible. Right, the chemicals in the water and what role they play in aggression, that has a lot of play in it, and I don't know if it's too well understood. We haven't gone quite as far as isolating certain systems for certain corals, period, end of story. A lot of our systems do have an entire variety of all kinds of different things. So yeah, chemical warfare could be a problem. We are running now quite a bit of carbon, not a ton of carbon, but quite a bit. And I had a really productive meeting with the guys over at, shoot, what's the name of the company? Ozotech. They're the ones that make the Poseidon aquarium ozone units. And yeah, we talked a lot about coral biology and the sort of things that I was like looking to accomplish with ozone. And one of those things was to break down the organic compounds that result in coral aggression. It's not a super high priority for me, but it's one of those things that if there's a technology that can just knock that down, that's kind of nice. Because there's certain things that we're currently doing that are less consistent. And what I mean by that is, let's say that the main factors that we're considering are, are carbon and ultraviolet. So the problem with carbon is that it gets expended, and if you don't stay up on it, you're effectively not gaining any of the benefits of carbon, and eventually I think that it can leach back out into the water, whatever the carbon had bound up. We have something in the ballpark of 10,000 gallons of aquarium systems here, and neglect is very much a possibility. So first thing, carbon. Second thing, UV. Now, going back to the whole neglect thing, a UV is a bulb sealed up in its own little container because you don't want to be like looking at UV. It's very, very damaging to your eyes. The problem with that is it's really hard to tell when you need to maintain something. There's two things in UV that degrade really quickly as far as the performance of UV goes. One is the cleanliness of the quartz sleeve. And they make like UV systems that have like its own little squeegee thing, plunger, to clean off that quartz sleeve. Unfortunately, those are really made for freshwater systems. And that's a metal thing that is going to like corrode in saltwater applications. That's not ideal. what you're supposed to do is take the whole thing apart and clean that quartz sleeve regularly. But I live in the real world, and of all the things that are going to get neglected, probably a quartz sleeve that you never see is going to be one of them. The second thing is you're talking about a UV bulb, and it's a UV fluorescent bulb. Those things are going to lose power month over month. So the amount of actual UV sterilization that you're getting and like its ability to break down organics, that's going to plunge between both the unclean quartz sleeve and bulb degradation. So the two things that I'm doing are by their very nature inconsistent. And for a home aquarium, sure, you can just say, look, I want to put this on a schedule and I'm going to be diligent and focused. It's like, guys, I don't have the discipline to work out enough to save my life and health. I'm definitely not going to have the discipline to monitor multiple systems like this over 2 different buildings. It's going to be a challenge. Realistically, it's not happening. So going back to ozone. Ozone is more consistent. Just as like a baseline technology is more consistent because you're just creating a source of that ozone and you're just delivering it into your protein skimmer. You're pretty good. So that is another aspect of that technology that appeals to me. Haven't tried it yet. It's one of the only technologies in the reef aquarium hobby that I have not tried. So I'm a little bit concerned about the adoption of it, but at the same time, it certainly has some advantages that I'm interested in. Deacanthus reef. Wow, number 92 is gorgeous. Been looking at the Favias last few days. Favias, I think, are one of those really undervalued corals right now because there are some insanely nice ones. And if you kind of get into like market dynamics and stock trading and everything, like the whole buy low, sell high thing, there's certain corals right now that are, I think, irrationally high priced for who knows what reason. And there's some corals that are chronically underappreciated, and I think Favia tend to be chronically underappreciated. There's a few out there, like for example, like Meltdown Favia, which, geez, how can I even describe it? It's multicolored, it's striped, it's got like a yellowish center and everything. It's crazy looking. That thing sells for a small fortune, but almost everything else can be had at a pretty good deal. And yeah, I think it's one of those things that the market, as far as like the coral buying market, doesn't quite get. And so if you're looking for pretty awesome corals that are, as far as LPS goes, pretty easy to keep, Favia are definitely a good choice. Okay. Also want to know if you have any pseudo mushrooms. Never seen one in person, only from your video on coral aggression. They're very uncommon. I got mine, geez, more than 10 years ago probably, and we've been propagating it ever since. And I've never once seen one for sale this entire time since. Luca says, next week I'm picking up my first Goniopora. Blue one, I have Alveopora in the tank and is doing good. Okay, what are you even saying, dude? Okay, any tips and tricks? So the only thing that I would really say is just to keep things stable and consistent. That is probably the most underrated bit of advice that I can ever give. I think that sometimes people try to change things in search of something better a lot, when they would have been a lot better served by keeping stuff consistent and just steady state. If you do that, I think just in general, you're going to have a lot more success than anything else, really. Stability is one of those things that's criminally underrated in the hobby. NC474, birthday today. Had to stop by and say hello. Well, hello and happy birthday. You made it. You made it another time around the sun. Tech Gear Talk, what's good? You tell me, bud. Glad you could stop in and say hello. So Tech Gear Talk, he's been on this channel before, I believe, on one of our live shows way back when. He does a lot of consumer electronics talk. And I told you guys his channel is going to blow up. And his channel has blown up. I think he's probably close to 500,000 subscribers by now. So welcome. I'm trying to get him to come visit. Like, see, the problem is we're both like antisocial hermits. And we live like 45 minutes away from each other. And I haven't seen Tech Gear Talk in 2 years. And I'm like, so when are you going to come visit, bud? Harkins Aquatics lives in Vegas, and he's been here since. Yes, I'm trying to guilt trip Tech Gear Talk to coming over. And I bet everybody else in chat is like, wait a minute. You're actually allowed to come over to Tidal Gardens? Everybody else isn't even allowed here. That's probably why he doesn't want to come. As soon as he hops into chat, I'm like all over him. Be like, dude, get over here. I'm most brutal to my close friends. Yeah, as far as keeping acros and Gani's together, Ganiapora are a weird one. They, depending on which ones you get, they can be more temperamental than others. Yeah, it's hard to say, like, blanket statements as to what would make Ganiapora do well. There's certain types of Ganiapora that just simply don't do well. There's some that are pretty tough. The most useless thing I can say is sometimes just do your best, cross your fingers and wait, and just hope. Hope-based strategies. They always have such great results. Okay, I've been sufficiently reprimanded. I'll come down in the next week or two for sure. Good. Let's do that. I mean, there's so much for us to catch up on because, like, we're both like studio nerds. You know, we have regular conversations about like how to kit out our various YouTube studio spaces. And it's like, you know, what would really be helpful is to actually be in the same room, in the same studio, talking about said studio. Okay. Peter's getting a lot of questions answered. Are Zoa spiders a death sentence? No. Got a frag as a freebie, and it had, no joke, 14 adult spiders. I've been dipping and quarantining them, but I don't want them to spread to my Zoa garden. Do you guys ever get any? And if so, do you chuck it or try to revive? Okay, so first off, there are very few instances where we try to like chuck corals. Like, I almost feel like an obligation to try. It might not be like the you know, it might make more sense like just cut your losses and such, but it's like there's certain things that are easier to treat than others, and spiders are actually pretty easy, I would say. There's a couple of different treatments I would try. They're like most of the dips work pretty well on spiders. So if you're just willing to take the time to go through that process, it'll likely work. So if it were me, I would try at least 2 of these treatments and possibly add in a third, which may or may not work, but might have some other benefits. So the first one, I like some of the pine oil based treatments. So like, I think Revive is one of those, Coral RX is another. Fill in the blanks, there's a bunch of them. They will likely work. After that, Bayer, or I believe it's called Bio Advanced, Bayer might work pretty well. And lastly, and the other thing about Bayer that might work well is because if those things have spiders, just in case you might also worry about nudibranchs, there are some zoanthid eating nudies that essentially take on the coloration of the zoanthid polyp. And those are also relatively easy to take care of, and Bayer, I know, works pretty well on nudibranchs, whereas other things don't work quite as well on nudies. The third thing that I might try is a whole tank treatment called Interceptor, which kind of knocks out the nervous system of things like crustaceans and possibly sea spiders. So in nuking your tank with Interceptor, you might take care of other issues. But so those are the 3 things that I would look at. And doing 2 of the 3 would probably wipe out your spider issue. They do a lot of damage though. Not the treatments necessarily, but spiders. I remember like a million years ago, you know, people, some of my friends that were like trying to go into coral farming, and they didn't quite appreciate just how bad pests could be. I think that this one guy filled a tank that must have been 14 feet long, and he filled it with like freshly cut zoas from the wild. And if you guys have ever seen zoas from the wild, they are guaranteed to have every pest imaginable. And sure enough, within a week, every single coral in that tank was dead. Every single zoa that they had set aside, like, I don't know, several hundred different cuttings, all gone. And yeah, that's how fast it can happen when you're talking about nudibranchs and spiders. It's really, really, really bad. I think that when you're talking about coral farming, you're always going to have like a baseline level of pests, and it becomes like a management process more than trying to like fully eradicate them, because these days I have way more faith in a pest's ability to stay alive than I do any large-scale producer of corals, their ability to eradicate them. Pests wouldn't be pests if you could very easily get rid of them. They're just very good at surviving Holocaust levels of chemical baths and crazy stuff. We were doing at one point, I think like 5x doses of flatworm exit, and we had flatworms survive like 4 treatments at between 3 to 5 times concentration of flatworm exit. Like, they're so tough, and every single time you do it, it looks like you have it taken care of, and then the next day you see like 1, and you're like, So we schedule another treatment, and by the time the second treatment happens, there's still a few here and there. You blast them with like another 4 to 5x dose, and you seem to have it all taken care of. Then you see like 1. Schedule a 3rd dose, blast it again. They come back. They're so tough, and there's certain pests that seemingly come back months after you thought that they were completely eradicated. And not only that, but you haven't even added in any new coral. Like, for example, there might be like a specific Montipora problem pest, and you think you have it beat. You haven't seen one of these things in a year, and as a precaution, you haven't bought a single Montipora the entire time, because you bring in a new Monty and you put all your existing Monties at risk, and still, all of a sudden, this pest will just come back out of nowhere, like it's like the phoenix or something rising from its ashes. So yeah, it's a constant struggle. But the difference between a coral farm that tries to do pest management and a coral farm that doesn't is that the coral farm that doesn't have coral, because certain pests are wipeout level problems, and essentially they can pretty much eradicate all your corals within a month. So that's kind of how you can tell. The ones that have really bad pest problems, they don't have a coral problem. It's all gone. How did I even start on that tirade? I forget what we were talking about. Oh, spiders. Thank you for that. Victoria White. Do kryptonite candy canes require more or less light than others? We have ours in roughly 120 something par, and they seem to do quite well. I would say I wouldn't go a lot higher than that if it were me. I don't think that there's much of a benefit in much higher lighting. The thing that really helps out candy canes more than anything else that I've seen is feeding them, but they're difficult to feed. I've also found we do feed them by turning off the flow and doing a lot of like concentrated foods right on top of them, and also they feed really well right before the lights go out. If you ever go see your tank at night, it seems that CYPHASTREA, candy canes, trumpet corals, whatever, they're very active at night, and they don't necessarily learn to eat during the day quite as well as some other corals. So either you have to like brute force feed them during the day, or you play to their schedule, which is to feed them at night. And if you do feed them pretty aggressively, they grow super fast and super healthy. Alveopora seem much more consistent than Ghani's. Maybe. Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's just individual by individual for us. We've had really good luck. I shouldn't even jinx myself, but we've had really good luck with some of our favorite ones lately. Less luck with some of the ones I care a little bit less about. But for the ones that have done well, they seem to be the ones with like the larger polyps. The micro ones tend to be a little bit more fragile. So Harkins just said, Bayer is selling their pesticide division this year, so you might need to stock up on some of that stuff, on some of the bio-advanced. There you go. So the other thing about nudibranchs, I'm kind of conflicted right now because we have a lot of nudibranchs that we got in trade from a local hobbyist. That these are the Aptasia eating nudibranchs. And they, to me, look like jumbo-sized versions of the Montipora eating variety that I hate with every cell of my body. So that has been a little bit of an adjustment period. The other thing is they lay eggs that looks like a spiral, which is a jumbo version of what the spirals look like for zoanthid eating nudibranchs. And that has been a little bit of an adjustment because we have this theoretically a very good thing, and it camouflages itself with these two things that I absolutely detest. So sometimes I look at this sideways thinking, are those eggs what are good or are they bad? You know, it's kind of scary. But if these Aptasia eating nudies do their job, that's going to be such a nice thing because we've had a hard time lately getting copper band butterflies in and healthy and eating and surviving. Like the ones that we're getting, they just don't eat. And so unfortunately, it's an awful experience to watch them just kind of waste away over the course of 3 weeks. This is also perhaps a good reason to look at your local fish stores and see if they have had like some long-term inventory of some of these more delicate species. Because if you want to get something from like if you have access to wholesalers or anything like that, there's certain fish you really don't want to mess with because of just how delicate they are coming in like that. And you know, I would have a copper band butterfly in just about every single aquarium just to deal with Aiptasia, but it's difficult too, because in part getting them in to begin with is difficult. The second thing is any type of aggression that they receive from other fish like tangs especially, and by the way, tangs here are effectively canceled. I've lost my patience entirely with tangs. I would not expect me to buy any more tangs. Yeah, I hate them. I hate them. Do I hate them as much as I hate Montipore eating nudibranchs? No, not quite that much, but we're really, really close. I hate them more than I hate clownfish. And clownfish have been canceled for years here. Let's see. But yeah, so tangs can be overly aggressive to copper bands. And like the hierarchy of like useful fish, you have like copper bands and you have tangs that are like in the floor somewhere as far as usefulness to me. Steve Ricketts just had a great frag swap here in Indiana. Got a really nice elegance coral. How often should I feed them? First elegance coral. If you wanted to play it safe, maybe twice a week. Elegance corals, you can feed them pretty easily, in fact, but they're not one of those corals that just are super demanding for nutrition in that way. Yeah, I would err towards the side of a little bit less food, just so you don't overwhelm the poor coral right off the bat. Alex Lenchekov. Hi, Than. So glad to see you. Thanks for joining us. Real quick, I want to see how many viewers we have. Cool. Looks like as of right this second, my analytics says that we have 211 concurrent viewers. That's pretty cool. I think the most we ever got was close to 300, I think. You know, the funny thing is we do these shows like every month or so. So I kind of have like goldfish brain memory about how they perform. Sometimes I think, yeah, like 200 is like really good, and then I remember, then I'll actually take a look at the analytics, and there might have been like a show we did last year that had like 400 or something that I just legit forgot about. Oh man. Lucas Aragon, copepods. Do you seed your coral farming tanks with pods or simply not needed? We do not seed them, but they survive our quarantine process, which is astounding considering how aggressive we are during quarantine to try to annihilate everything. It goes back to the whole pests and other little creepy crawlies that are even beneficial like pods. They survive a whole lot. In our new tanks, I actually don't think that we have pods. We have other little crustaceans that survive, but I think that the pods didn't make it through. Now, I sound like I'm contradicting myself because it depends on what pods we're talking about, right? There's certain crustaceans that have made it through, and there's others that have not, but we didn't make an active effort to go through and seed anything. Deresian? I'm excited that copper bands were recently successfully aquacultured. Me too. That is very new news. That was something that I saw come across my feed, I think about a week ago, that The organization I'm drawing a total blank on. I just saw it yesterday. Anyhow, I'm like, is it like Rising Tide Aquatics? They all sound the same, dude. All the different places sound the same. But supposedly, captive bred copper bands could be a thing. There's also like so when Harkins was last here, he had mentioned there was a goby called like a Molly Miller Blenny, a Molly Miller, and they were supposed to eat Aptasia, and supposedly they were already aquacultured for years, and yet there isn't a single one available for sale on the internet. Because I would have bought it. I was looking. I don't understand. Like, why can't we have nice things? Why are people breeding clownfish and not the Aptasia eating blennies, guys? One of these things is useful. The other one bites you. Rising Tide. There we go. Yeah, it was Rising Tides Conservation. Okay. I thought it sounded familiar. Tracy Henderson, well, I jumped and bought the Scorpion King Favia. It is outstanding. Truly it is. Okay, so Tracy, I don't remember what we're selling it for on this show. I paid $300 retail for something smaller than it. And we've been propagating it ever since. So you are getting a better deal than I got. Ms. Mermaid, hello. I love that you've been offering rarer types of macroalgae like blue hypnea. Do you ever see Tidal Gardens offering more types of algae in the future? I would love to do that. Like with most things, we could stand for improvement in our operations here. I would love to have individual setups for macroalgae and for us to just to do better with them. Like right now, I think that the way that we have it all set, it's kind of an afterthought. And what usually that means is there's probably a fish eating half of our inventory at any given time. But I think that if we had separate systems for algae, we could definitely cut down on the fish predation, but also keep them cleaner, because as soon as for us there's any kind of nuisance algae, it's really difficult to separate the nuisance algae from the macroalgae that we're trying to cultivate and keep clean. So fingers crossed, hopefully in the future, yes. Macroalgae seems to be like such a no-brainer for us to carry, right? Because it's like it helps filter the water. We don't really run into the tannin issue, especially since we're running more activated carbon now, and we will eventually probably give ozone a try, which will also alleviate some of the chemistry issues that you might get from macroalgae. All of that stuff, like it seems like a super no-brainer, and it helps filter the water. But in practice for us, it just hasn't been built into our systems effectively. So again, long answer. Yeah, maybe. Thoughts and prayers, hopefully. Okay. Second comment. Some of my friends and I keep macroalgae display tanks, not just refugiums. Yes, that's really cool. And I think that's a cool, basically unaccomplished niche in this hobby. Because if you think about like freshwater aquariums, it's the crown jewel of a freshwater aquarium is a super nice planted tank. And there's really not a lot of reasons why that couldn't be a thing in not reef aquariums, but saltwater aquariums. I think a lot of it really boils down to some, again, issues with algae that you don't want to keep, and cleaning up those tanks of those types of algae without killing the decorative species that you want. To a lesser degree, right now, what we're trying to do is to have some mangroves. We're successfully growing the mangroves. It turns out they're actually pretty easy. The problem is, like their roots and everything like that, they have all kinds of other stuff growing there. And we can't clean these things sufficiently where I want to introduce them into our new systems. In essence, yeah, we can set up really cool mangrove tanks, but in doing so, we've now introduced this other stuff that I didn't want. So we haven't done it. We have a lot of these poor mangroves sitting in buckets, like just off by themselves. So once I think we kind of figure out things like that better, it'll be cool. They just need to make a Copper Band Pixar movie, I guess. Wasn't there a Copper Band in Finding Nemo? I haven't seen, okay, I don't remember when Finding Nemo came out. It might have been 20 years ago. I thought was it a Moorish idol? They can't even do anything right. Of course it'd be something like a Moorish idol, like one of the most unkeepable fish in the hobby, right? But I remember something that kind of looked like a butterfly. I'll look that up. Finding. I'm not going to rely on my memory. I'm getting old. Finding Nemo. Okay, one of them is a Moorish idol. The other one is a completely fictitious blue and white butterfly fish. I guess it kind of looks like a Copper Band if a Copper Band were blue and white. But the other one that probably has a bigger speaking part is a Moorish idol. I personally, in 30-something years in this hobby, I've never owned a Moorish idol. Never tried. Okay, all right. Enough Google image search. Getting distracted here. Harkins, I found some Molly Millers at my local fish store, but they were sub 1 inch. I should go to some of my LFS more often. A couple of the ones here that were closer to me had closed, however. I don't get out of the house at all. Who am I kidding? And to leave the house to go shopping for fish, boy, that's asking a lot. I appreciate such a thorough answer. The difficulties you mentioned with macroalgae are very real. They're not the easiest things. Yeah. But you know, the thing about macroalgae, I guess, is that if you have a portion of it that's intertangled with something that you don't want, I mean, I guess like a part of keeping macroalgae is that you prune it. It's very much, you know, an algae, so you could just be hyper aggressive about your pruning and just remove large scale swaths of it, and hopefully you get the more problematic stuff out, assuming that it's not embedded in your rock or something like that. All these things are possible with effort, I guess. And that's the biggest issue that we're running into here. Not that we don't try. It's that we physically do not have like the bandwidth to do all these things. There are, and I've mentioned this, you know what? Scroll back and look at some past live shows that we've done here on YouTube. It's the same story. There are literally boxes full of thousands and thousands of dollars worth of controllers and whatever tech that we haven't opened in now 6 months and hooked up because we didn't have the 2 hours that it would have taken just to take it out of the box and set it up somewhere. It's like too much of a hassle to do it. We've never done it. One of these days, we will act upon all this stuff. Let's see. That's Flow. They are jerks. Flow. Is Flow the fake one? The fake blue one? The cheap version is a Heniokus. We're talking about the butterfly and Finding Nemo again. I haven't seen that movie in forever. How do you guys remember this stuff? Scott Tupper, Acanthophyllia. What are your thoughts on keeping them? I wouldn't really say that they're too different than most other big, meaty, large polyp stonies. We're talking about medium to low flow, probably closer to low rather than medium. You're talking about medium-ish light, anything from 75 to 125 par. They can be fed, and I think that most things that can be fed, I encourage you to try. They probably aren't going to do too well with any kind of fish that might nip at them. Yeah, very general on that. Let's see. Enjoy them while you can. From what I understand, they might not have been the most legally collected or imported coral for quite some time. I haven't seen the full picture because I am not an importer. But I've seen some documentation that gives me the impression that their import has not been like openly available as far as like a quota from Indonesia, at least since 2017. So in the last 4 years, the influx of Acanthophyllia is either quasi-legal at best to downright international fraud levels of bad. So, and the thing is, they show up literally every single price list I see now, like to this day. And I know from a lot of the import documents, there's no quota for Acanthophyllia. So, and I think that the story there is that these outfits in Indonesia are allowed to export their existing stock of stuff that was collected like pre-2016. Yeah. What's the likelihood that they were sitting on something from 2016 at a collection station in Indonesia and are just now slowly every week exporting it to the US market? Not the most likely. I'm going to go ahead and say not likely at all. So do we buy them right now? I mean, we have a couple, but I'm not actively looking for those things. They're such a high price thing. I mean really high price. Like you guys have no idea. Some of them wholesale for well into 4 figures. No, I'm good. I'm good on that. Moorish idols are jerks, even by benthic feeder standards. Huh. Okay, good to know. I'm sure that I will love Moorish idols like I love yellow tangs or something. Peter T managed to keep a green Bali Slimer alive. That's an Acropora for those of you that are curious what he's talking about. What are other easy acros should I try next? Staghorns, Tenuis? I would probably stay away from Tenuises actually. So certain Tenuises are going to be a little bit more fragile than others. So I guess in the challenge end of the spectrum, you might run into a challenge. That might be a very real problem for you, especially for a new Acropora keeper. The other thing that people don't realize about Acropora Tenuises, by the way, Tenuises, what's the best analogy for Tenuises? They are like the Ferrari or Lamborghini of the Acropora world. Like if you look up like I don't know. Let's talk about Instagram, right? The most flashy automotive Instagram accounts. They're going to be showing off some really exotic car, like a Bugatti or something like that, right? But I think that the ownership of said Bugatti or Ferrari might be a much worse experience than you ever imagined. Like the thing will always be in the shop. The thing requires oil changes that cost 10 grand or something insane, right? There's all these hoops you have to go through to enjoy your Veyron or your Vanquish, right? That's the problem that Instagram doesn't communicate to you. So the problem with Teniuses is that they have this much leeway for you to get like those exotic colors that you're seeing on social media. You have to have very specific lights on very specific conditions for a very long period of time with very specific water chemistry to elicit that sort of stuff, okay? Otherwise, you will have a beige coral, straight up. And that is assuming that you didn't kill the poor thing, because they tend to be a little bit more fragile than others. They're a little testy. They're not the most reliable vehicle for day-to-day driving, so to speak. So if you're trying Teniuses for the first time, be prepared for shocking levels of disappointment. But at the same time, if things go well, they reward you when you're looking at it under all blue light with probably the most dazzling specimens of Acropora. So to answer your question, probably not a Tenius. Next question. This is a good one. Well, I don't know if it's a good one. Something that interests me anyway. Brock B. Recently bought what was labeled a Cynarina. Come to find out, it's an endophilia. A bit of research taught me the difference between acanthophilia, endophilia, and Cynarina. Fascinating. So an endophilia at different times will be called an acanthophilia. At different times it was called a scolemia. And this is like years ago. And also it can be, like in Brock's situation, a Cynarina. I do have some video of endophilia on my channel from way back in the day. It is like this cross between an acanthophilia and a Cynarina. They are translucent. Imagine an acanthophilia, right? Very similar in shape, very similar in fleshiness, but it's translucent like a Cynarina is. Very cool. We used to have a green one, and we used to have a red one. And what's really cool about it is how the skin, when it folds and kind of compresses, it gets more intense highlight. So you have this translucent coral, but every time it has like an irregularity in its skin, it gets like brighter. Super cool stuff. I think we might have one, but it's not quite as exotically colored as the ones we used to have. I'm going to read your comment, Casper, just because it brings a smile to my face. Because this is a spell check fail. I breed zoo in your funeral. I also grab animals from my tank. I love it. Yeah. Good job, Siri. All right, Lucas Aragon. Than, are you going to have your own tank build series, or should we count the main display build as your tank? Okay, so there's going to be... One day there might be 4 tank builds that are mine. And this is the idea. There's going to be this SPS show tank. There is going to be a very large Peninsula show tank, which I believe you saw get set up, but we haven't done anything with it just yet. And 2 species-specific tanks, one of which I wanted to be an all-anemone tank, and that had gone so poorly that we had to come up with something else going on there. So poorly meaning we put in one giant Colorado sunburst anemone. It immediately hated everything. It split twice, which is good, but looked like it was going to die any minute now. So we had to take everything out and rehome it, and it's now done a lot better. And now we have 3 of them. It's great. But my species-specific anemone tank is a non-starter currently because reasons. But yes, in theory, going along with it would be nice if we could do things better, I could have 4 show tanks. I don't. I have 1 sort of show. Actually, I should do an update on my SPS show tank because of in my absolute neglect that I've been accomplishing quite well lately. That tank is spectacular. So that's the ugly phase tank that everybody said, you know, I'm never buying coral from Tidal Gardens because they have hair algae. That one, that tank is like spotless now. It is spotless. And I haven't put my hand in that tank in 3 weeks minimum now. It looks outstanding. The corals in that tank, all different types of acropora. Now there's probably like, I don't know, a dozen, 2 dozen different types of acro colonies. They're growing double the speed of the colonies that are in the frag system, which is all plumbed together. So it's sharing the same water as our dedicated acropora growing system, but it's growing at twice the speed, which might be a result of more flow, might be a result of more light, because we do have 12 radions over that tank rather than 6. Yeah, things are going really well. I cannot complain. So I should probably show that to you guys. Kayvon Torrendez, tenuous frags are also tiny. Correct. You will never get a very large one. Interesting. Connor Kessler. Hey, Than. Have you had any experience with low magnesium having particularly negative effects with microlords? Currently troubleshooting why my microlords just aren't thriving like its neighbors. Funny you mentioned low magnesium. Our tanks currently have low magnesium, and I didn't really notice anything specifically bad with our micros. Why do we have low magnesium? We recently switched to Instant Ocean, and sometimes you just kind of assume that things are going to be okay. Because there's like certain aspects of Instant Ocean that have worked out really nicely, like how quickly it mixed clear. And I guess me thinking that it's probably normal and fine for a reef salt to be kind of close to like natural saltwater levels. No. Turns out Instant Ocean, I guess this is apparent to everybody but me, is that Instant Ocean is chronically low in calcium and magnesium. So our magnesium levels are dropping lower and lower and lower out of spec, and we've had to re-add that as an additive into our salt supply, and we will likely be transitioning to reef crystals, which has higher magnesium and calcium. Who knew? Everybody but me, apparently. So going back to your question, though, I don't know if necessarily magnesium depletion is a big problem that you're seeing. The one thing that I would suggest, you might be hearing this more and more often on this stream, is feeding. That's the #1 thing that I've seen really help grow micromusa. I would go as far as to say that's probably the one thing that everybody does wrong with micromusa. They are one of the hungriest corals I've ever seen, and the ones that have demonstrated the most benefit to active feeding. In our old systems at the greenhouse, one of the problems that we had was they just weren't really well designed so that we could just turn off pumps, have it be completely still, and then for us to directly feed all of our corals. So in our new farm, that was one of like the key design features I wanted. Okay, I want to have all the tanks running, but I want to shut exactly this tank off so that we can feed it for 20 minutes and then reactivate it and not have to mess with anything. And since doing that and taking the time to directly feed our micromusas, they have exploded in growth. And yeah, that's been a total epiphany for us, just how much they eat. There's certain corals that we have in there, and they seem to eat triple their body mass like every third day practically. Like we stuff them full of mysis. Peter, I've recently bought a Porites rock with bisma worms. I'm wondering if they molt. I have not noticed that. Also, if there's any way to get the worms to reproduce. I've never seen them reproduce, unfortunately. I wish they did, because they're very cool. Lincoln Towns, any thoughts on the MaxSpec return pumps? Unfortunately, I've never used them. I have relatively limited experience when it comes to return pumps. Return pumps are one of those things that tend to be mission critical, so I don't shop around a lot. I don't have a big appetite to try new things when it comes to that. Right now, I would say half of our return pumps are ABIZs, which are, if you know what ABIZ are, they're the not messing around ones. And if I'm not using an ABIZ, I'm probably using an Iwaki, made in Japan, also a not messing around pump. Junas, hi, how much is shipping in Finland? Unfortunately, we do not ship corals outside of the US. International shipping is a monstrously difficult hurdle to overcome, and it's not something that we're really looking into right now. Snap goes bruh. Somehow I found a large Tenias frag for $80. Has 8 branches and has great colors too. Teniases can be very cool. Yeah. Very, very lucky to get. I mean, right now I would say that of a lot of the corals that get like the most hype, Acropora teniases might be king of that hill. I mean, there's a lot of expensive corals. Let's not kid ourselves right now. But as far as like acros go, definitely a lot of room to play in high-priced acro land when it comes to teniases. And guys, I'm not kidding around when I say it is a very specific thing that you're looking for with teniases, and if you deviate from that little formula in the slightest way, you're gonna be shockingly disappointed. These things aren't just in the bag. Like, you know how there's certain corals that as soon as you lift it up out of like that just out of a bag, it's like, oh my gosh, it's a glowing rainbow. Nobody's ever said that about a tenias. It's going to be like, what is this beige piece of garbage that I just spent $300 for? That's more like it. And the other thing is, that thing might have been a pretty cool looking coral in somebody else's tank, and just the process of it getting from his tank to your tank has made the thing a tan coral now. They're that sensitive. And that's why I always encourage people to not immediately put people on blast in unboxing videos when there's like, I just spent $2,000 on so-and-so acro collector on Instagrams, acro pack. I get it. It's all beige garbage. Let me stop you right there, son. It is going to take, no joke, 3 months before those corals have any chance to remotely resemble the other guy's corals that you were buying off of on Instagram. Okay, so just doing you guys a solid out there. Teniases are hard. They are hard to keep alive. They are hard to color up. They're hard to even view when you're not under like the most bluest of blue light. It's not the most like aquarist friendly coral out there. But they're hot. They're hot right now. So I get it. People want the hot stuff. Ashley Hooker, can I get a shout out? Sure, Ashley. What's up? Thank you for joining us. Let's see. I wonder, is the chemistry of salt water from the ocean the same off the shore of the UK as it would be off the shore of America? Would you find more calcium, magnesium in one other than the other? There's always going to be some variations, yeah. I'm sure there's plenty of studies on such things. Harkin says shipping to Europe is like 10K with a 50K order minimum. It'd be like that. It's a pain, yeah, to do any kind of international shipping. There's some places that will do it for soft corals. So for example, I know that there's some places down in Florida that do export to Europe, and sometimes, like, I've had a European customer ask, could you please ship your stuff to Florida that they will then ship as a part of a much larger order to the European Union or the UK. And we've played around with that possibility, but you're not saving any money, guys. Like, it is, you're talking about 10K in shipping and $50,000 already that you're going to be spending with that place down in Florida. And I am then just piggybacking my thousands of dollars worth of corals onto that shipment of soft corals only. No stony corals, because stony corals requires CITES, blah, 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 blah. Ain't happening. This is purely for like mushrooms and things like that. You're talking thousands of dollars minimum. And on top of that, I've never actually done it. This was just a conversation that I had with somebody. Lincoln Towns bought 5 corals last live show, and I'm in love with them. There's no good elephants in my area of New Hampshire. Well, thank you so much for shopping. I definitely appreciate it. I got bills. I got bills to pay, so I definitely appreciate it. And I'm glad that you like them. Yeah, local fish stores. There used to be a lot more in my area. I used to mention that there were so many at one time, but for one reason or another, they've kind of gone thin. Lucas, I'm curious with the lighting Kelvin change over the 35 seconds. Do you have a special light that helps run through it, or is it just filmed, or is it just done in post? It is done in post. To do it in practical, A, would be very difficult, and I'm not looking to do stuff that's difficult. But B, I don't even know if it would be any more helpful or not. The way that that cameras capture this sort of thing, it might not actually look any better, because we've changed practical light before, and it's like a dynamically changing light in that way. It's a lot of effort for very little reward. So this is just a special effect. Architects, what are your thoughts on millies? I like them. I actually like them a lot. They seem to be a fairly, relatively speaking, a fairly easy acropora to keep alive. They provide motion because of their extended tentacles that is uncommon with other types of acropora, and I appreciate some degree of movement even in the fuzzy stick tank. And there are some really cool ones. Like, we've got one that's called a golden goose that is incredibly bright yellow that develops pink highlights. What more can you ask than that? And they're not even that expensive. Wow. It's been a while. I don't know how much we charge for them. At one time they were expensive, and I was thinking, well, we've been selling them a while. Maybe that they're cheaper now. I don't remember. I just know that I've got one in my SPS show tank downstairs, and I didn't even glue it in place. I just shoved the little plug down into the rock crevice, and it grew fast enough to attach before a sea urchin would come along and grab it and throw it away. So, testament to how fast it grew. Connor, another question for you. Do you think the jury is still out on different euphilia being able to mix in proximity without warfare? I get mixed answers if you can keep them close together safely. There's degrees of working out. We try to keep them apart. they still touch. I wouldn't go trying to intentionally put them right on top of one another. And again, as a general rule, I like to give corals as much room as you can possibly give them. Euphyllias touching one another is not the end of the world. Are they fighting? Yeah, probably. Is it ideal? Probably not. Does it look cool? Kind of does. So depending on just like how conservative you are as far as coral aggression goes, that's really going to determine whether or not you're going to do something like that. Tank space considerations, obviously, that's going to play a part. For us, I try to separate them out as much as I can, but we're a coral farm. The whole point is to try to make a lot of something, and eventually they're going to start touching one another. When in doubt, try to minimize it. But if you're trying to do some kind of creative arts project, it's possible. People have done it. Best practice? Maybe not. Luca, have you ever had sun corals, aka TAPASTREA? Yes, we have some right as we speak. The key is to get a colony that is eating. So if this is almost like an impossible task to ask for, but a lot of ones that are imported from the wild will have problems eating. We got one colony from the wild a while ago that simply does not eat, does not respond to feeding, and it's been months now. Where we did get another colony that did eat, and because of such, we've been able to propagate the heck out of it. Boy, like, you can stuff them with food. Like that is another coral, because TAPASTREA, for the folks that are unfamiliar, they're called sun coral. They are a non-photosynthetic coral, meaning you have to feed the heck out of them. And getting that feeding behavior really is key. We load them with food. Double their body volume. So let's say their closed size is the size of like a nickel. We would probably put a quarter-sized amount of like mysis shrimp and all kinds of other like goodies and just squirt it on there, and they would all just like gobble that up and just get enormous. And then they would extend out so they could like fill up with more food, and we'd feed them again, and they would just get even bigger and bigger and bigger. Next day, they've processed all that food and they want more. That's really the look that you're going for. You want to have obnoxiously fat colonies. One thing that we did know is that eventually the fish catch on to the fact that you're feeding that coral. So the most successful tanks that we have for TAPASTREA specifically don't have fish, which can be a problem because nothing is then eating that uneaten food as much. I suppose you could have other detritivores and stuff like that that clean that stuff up. And obviously, since you don't have tangs or fox faces, especially fox faces, because they figure out that this thing is full of seafood, you might run into algae management issues in that tank. But long story short, feeding is the key. They eat way more than you might think, and whatever you can do to pile the food onto those guys, the more successful that you're going to be. Because once they do start to eat that aggressively, they start to replicate. And then we've even had ours sexually reproduce, and we've been growing out the little buds even. So I would say that we're wildly successful as far as keeping those corals. We sell them faster, unfortunately, than we're growing them, so we need to like dial back on how many we offer. I lost track of my place in the chat, so one sec. Okay, Appleman 30,000. For someone getting deeper into the hobby, what is a coral you recommend that looks good in daylight-like lighting? There's a lot of them that do. Depends on what your appetite is and really what you're going for. But off the top of my head, Stylophora look amazing in daylight. And to double up on that, they don't look good in blue actinic lighting. A lot of them don't fluoresce. The green ones do, but like the rainbow colored ones, like the nice little pink cat's paw looking guys, they don't fluoresce. So under daylight, I've seen like the purple and bright pink ones look like they're glowing from inside in literal sunlight. That's how good they look. Let's see. CYPHASTREA, when they're open, look great in daylight. Going back to our talk there. On screen, we had just a couple of different types of chalices. A lot of chalices, surprisingly, I think look better in daylight than they do under actinic. A lot of brain corals, like I was about to say CYPHASTREA again. Trichophilia, they look really cool. Let's see. I actually think that a lot of scolies look really cool under daylight. Connor, not looking to do something difficult, embarks on building one of the most incredible and bleeding edge coral propagation facilities in all of North America. Okay, so that's funny that you mentioned that, Connor. Okay, so there's two like philosophies I have in life that I'm not actually good at. A, I want to make stuff easy, and B, I am actually trying to find ways to be lazier. And it takes a lot of work to make difficult tasks easy that make it easier for me to be lazy. Because I'm trying very hard to be a lazy person. And I'm failing substantially at both of those things. Obviously, here I am on a Saturday doing a live stream, right? Like, by the way, broadcast on a relatively advanced level, not that easy. Turns out, I've just gotten used to it, I guess. But yeah, it's true. Like we go pretty hard on the facilities here, and I'm going to be going really hard on automation now that I have a little bit more faith in it. Peter, I've only been in the hobby 5 months and I don't want to kill anything, lol. That is a very good sentiment that will carry you very far in this hobby. I think that people tend to, I don't know what it is, but a lot of new people, I think, don't quite have the appreciation for the hobby that they should. I especially see it in folks that are, again, looking for something easy. There really is nothing easy about this hobby. There really is. I think that people try to oversimplify things to make it feel more accessible. There's nothing easy about this. And a case in point, okay? It will take one bad day for you to lose everything. How's that for easy, right? You could be one power outage away from losing everything. You could be one stuck auto top off from losing everything. You could be one broken hanging bracket away from your lights going into your water and zapping everything and losing everything. Your favorite multi-kilobuck fish that you've been looking for, rarely imported from Africa, has a genetic mutation that makes it incredibly rare. That thing just jumped out of your tank within the first 24 hours. That sort of thing. Like, there are so many pitfalls. Literally one bad day will end it for you. This place, for example, I need to build a place that can withstand temperatures of up to 105 degrees on its worst day, and then have a power outage, to minus 10 degrees in the dead of winter and have the boiler system that heats everything fail. It has to account for both of those situations reliably, or you lose everything. There's nothing easy about this hobby. And so I think that when you kind of have like a greater appreciation of like how delicate these systems really are. Yeah, I think that kind of like going into the perspective of like, I really just don't want to kill anything. You go down the rabbit hole, well, what really does it take to do this entire hobby well? And then you start to get a better appreciation for some of the folks that have like truly spectacular tanks and the lengths that they go to protect that effort. Now, I wouldn't even call it an investment, but it's a tremendous effort to put together a system of that type. Perfect case in point, my friend over in Dallas, his tank I saw 2 years ago, it's a 1,000 gallon SPS dominated tank. His name's Ryan, so if you like look back at my channel, you can see his magnificent tank, and God knows what kind of like massive fortune that cost to put together. Well, if you guys are up on current events, Dallas, Texas did have a little problem with a week-long power outage, right? Because of like freezing cold temperatures that their electricity utility wasn't really well prepared for. And his tank did survive that whole problem. I mean, like people were dying, right? And yeah, these things do happen. You have to like kind of like prepare for some awful situations. Yeah, but again, that kind of instills in me like an appreciation for like, how do you protect such a thing? How do you protect all these things? Connor, you described the purpose of an Apex controller in a nutshell. Makes sense to me. Yeah, and for us, we even like double, triple down on these sort of things. Like I don't necessarily trust one controller's opinion on anything. There could be bad readings. There could be a bad probe here or there. So I'm actually looking for a lot of redundancy even on that sort of thing on testing. So currently on one of our systems that we're doing the most as far as automation goes, I have two different things testing for DKH, for alkalinity, and sure enough, they do differ from each other, but they differ from each other consistently, so we kind of have an idea of what the real value is at any given time, which is kind of nice. Deresian, this probably has been mentioned earlier, but I couldn't catch the beginning. When are orders made today shipped out? Okay, so let me look at the calendar just in case. Okay. Good, no national holidays. That's what I was looking for. Most likely, the order will go out Monday for delivery Tuesday. If we have significant overload, it will go out Tuesday for delivery Wednesday. If you require a specific shipping date, go ahead and just email us at support@tidalgardens.com, reference your order numbers, and we will try to get you on the calendar for a different day. But I anticipate that most of the orders will be going out on Monday. So the reason why I hesitate is I don't know how many orders we've gotten up to this point just regularly over the weekend. We have like a hard cap on the number of orders we can physically pack. Yet another thing that we're trying to improve upon. More on that later. But the idea is that we want to be able to get over 60 boxes out. That is like our hard limit. But if we have more orders than that, then stuff starts getting pushed off. But most likely Monday, to answer your question. Ever heard of Reef Pi software? I have not. It is basically an Apex alternative that runs on Raspberry Pi. You know, until a week ago, I've never owned a Raspberry Pi, but I own one now to run my 3D printer. I still don't actually know how to use it. Snap goes, bruh, have you considered solar panels? I have. So solar panels here don't make any real financial sense, which has never stopped me before, guys. if you followed this channel for a little while, payback period, you know, like doesn't really factor into my mental state hardly ever. I simply don't care for a lot of this stuff. I'm like, in many ways, I'm the worst businessman that's ever walked the earth. But I am considering solar panels for reasons other than financial. I like the idea of energy autonomy. I like that if something were to really go wrong, that I have solar, and not even as a true backup necessarily, but like, I mean, let's just say, for example, like worst case scenario, the federal government bans the sale and ownership of coral. Okay, well, Tidal Gardens is gonna have to take a little bit of a break from the whole, you know, selling and growing of coral thing, right? I could literally, based on my solar panels, based on my rainwater collection, based on my well, I could literally turn into a subsistence farmer and survive. I can grow onions and live, that sort of thing. I have a greenhouse, guys. I can grow all kinds of things. Turns out I'm a tomato farmer now. Tomatoes. Yeah, so in that sense, I do like the idea of solar panels. It'll cost me $250,000 to outfit the roof of this building with solar panels. So it's not a huge priority of mine, especially considering that it's not really a great investment, but it does like scratch a little itch I have as far as some other things that solar does avail me of. Avail me of or avail me to. I don't know what the phrase is. Juan Gomez, hello, first time. Do you ship abroad internationally, or is it just USA? It is just the US, unfortunately. It's, yeah, the international shipping thing is just not something we can do. At least not yet. Whoa, Joseph Puzo, equipment failure is real and something we fear. Sadly, my LFS lost his son to a broken heater cleaning a tank. Ugh, that's terrible. Yeah, that's absolutely terrible. Like here, unfortunately, I have to like put on my actual like entrepreneur hat, and I have to like look at stuff like, okay, what could get one of my employees killed? And that is something that like I do think a lot about. Like, guys, I don't want to be responsible for an employee death in my facility, that sort of thing. Which I will tell you a story about how goofy this stuff is. At one time, I had less than spectacular electricians working on this building, okay? And I've told this story before, I'll tell it again because it's so good. These clowns managed to wire up regular outlets, regular fixtures and devices in my bathroom at 220 volt, okay? 220 out of a regular socket. So at one point, one of my guys, Ben, he was screwing in a light bulb in the bathroom, okay? And gets a tremendous shock. And you know, I've gotten a shock before from a light bulb. It's not that fun. But he was saying it was like hurting his arm for hours. I'm like, that's awfully excessive for getting shocked by a light bulb, right? And then another contractor, his tools were like dying, like frying themselves. And this was weird. And then our exhaust fan in the bathroom died. And it turned out that, yeah, several different points in that bathroom were wired at 220. So theoretically, my guy could have died by getting electrocuted by that stupid light fixture because these morons criminally negligently wired my bathroom at 220 rather than 110. So yes, scary stuff happens. Let's see, Simon. What causes polyp bailout of torches? Typically it's bacterial somehow. I would bet on some combination of bacteria and other weird little micro bugs. Yeah, and once polyp bailout starts to happen, yeah, it's not a particularly well understood thing. Okay, Connor. Powerwall battery tech will be worth its weight in gold for large-scale aquaria facility. It's getting cheaper and more efficient. Yeah, I was looking at Tesla. Tesla does not make a product that works for us, unfortunately. The battery tech might not be great for us. If anything, at this point, now that we have a backup generator, the sort of thing that would be good for us is probably to have UPSs, uninterruptible power. So those are UPSs, right? And APC is the company that makes UPSs. Anyway, to put those on like kind of like mission critical devices so they're uninterrupted, because there's like a little 30-second lag between when the power actually goes off and when the generator kicks on, and just to bridge that gap, that might be something worth considering. Okay, so Luca is doing a 40-gallon tank. Wants mandarins. It will be connected to 140. So how long should you wait for copepods to colonize a tank until adding them? You know what? It wouldn't be a time thing as much as I think that you can really turbocharge copepods by giving them like great places to live. Like there's like a stuff called like pod hotels and stuff like that. You can buy structure. You know what? I should come up with like a 3D printed product that's like the perfect pod hotel. That's both easy to maintain and clean from like detritus aspects, but also be like perfect to give them like a home to reproduce like crazy. Because if you give them the home to reproduce like crazy that protects them from fish predation, you will have all the copepods you can handle. And just basically like squirt food in there, let them go crazy, let them reproduce like crazy, and as they go out from there, they can feed your fish. Yeah, standard in the UK, 240 hurts like hell. Yeah, you can get killed. I need to take a pee break because I've been drinking that much water since we started. So I'll be right back. Please enjoy the conversation amongst yourselves. And I'm back. Oh. Okay. What did I miss? Hamid is asking, and I just lost his comment. I seem to not be able to grow SPS. I keep salinity and alk stable, but even Slimer is dying except bird's nest. But for this setup, I'm using regular instant ocean salt. So is that the reason? It might be. So we use instant ocean right now, but not for that much longer. Instant ocean is chronically low in calcium and magnesium. It's been a well-documented thing, and it's bearing out in our testing here. We have to supplement quite a lot of both of those. And we're likely going to switch over to reef crystals. I suspect that instant ocean is mainly formulated for fish-only tanks. And since they do so much business with public aquariums, by the way, I'm going to go ahead and guess that a whole 5% of their aquarium systems actually have coral or something. The rest of their 5% might be like incredibly overstating how much. It might be 1% of their volume really requires like reef level chemistry. I mean, just imagine like their 2 million gallon shark tanks and stuff like that that are out there. Clearly, instant ocean is fine for that application. The sharks do not care about the magnesium content of that water. So that could be an issue that you're running into, is that like the salt that you're using was never really meant for the application that we're doing. Now, then why are we using it? Because I'm a big dummy and I didn't really look into it. I just kind of assumed that, you know, that salts are trying to replicate the ocean. They're really not. They're really trying to make money. And so, right tool, right job. Perhaps I gave it too much credit. Anyway, considering going to reef crystals and then seeing if we have to supplement that further. You know, it's funny. I have to show you this this video at some point. We need to get video of this mandarin that we have in my SPS show tank. We do have, they're not, I guess not really pods. They're these little tiny, like, they look like little mini mantis shrimp. And this is the only fish in there that really goes after them. We have a wrasse in there as well, but the mandarin really goes after these things. This mandarin is so fat. He looks like Jabba the Hutt. Like his belly is so big that his fins can't touch the ground. Yeah, it's like he's probably gonna get diabetes or something. He eats so much, but it's cool to see. Sammy 31D, reef crystals mixes at higher DKH. Last batch was 11.5 alkalinity. That's actually kind of cool. I mean, okay, so 11.5 is actually really high. I would be happier if it's closer to 10. However, overkilling an alk is not the worst thing in the world just because of how much stony coral we typically have in our systems. I could see that being a problem long-term in like a soft coral only tank where you might have alkalinity creeping up like that. Tropic Marine mixes at 8.8, which is perfect. Yeah, but Tropic Marine, see, here's my problem with Tropic. First of all, it's expensive. Second of all, coming from Germany, there are supply issues. And in my place, that is absolutely a hard deal killing, unacceptable situation. There cannot be an interruption. And in a pinch, you will always be able to find instant ocean or reef crystals. Like that is just simply, you can find that on any corner store if you need to, practically, right? It is the most generic of generic salts that are out there. But Tropic Marine, I'm not even going to say that it's not the best. It very well might be the best salt. But if there is a supply issue, it is no longer the best salt. It went from best salt to absolute non-starter as a consideration. And a secondary thing is the cost. It's expensive. S2 Minute, where do you get your fish from, Than, if you don't mind? That's a good question. We've in the past got them from a wholesaler. Mixed results there. Mostly not great. We've also got them from other hobbyists. Works out way better. I think, and the other places that we would normally get them would be from a pet store that actually has some quarantine procedure. Those are super rare. The one that I was thinking of no longer does it. But if you have a pet store, a local fish store near you that does any kind of quarantine, okay, I don't care if that fish is triple the price, it is worth it. I'm gonna throw that out there. Our last batch of wholesale fish that we got, I think I spent $600 plus shipping. So let's just go ahead and assume that the shipping was $100. So I paid $700. And from that batch of fish currently alive, I think it's 2 algae blennies and 2 fox faces. So those fish are what, $165 a piece. Plus I get to watch a couple other fish die horrible deaths. Nah. So in the future, I'm probably going to look a little bit more aggressively at locally sourced stuff. I hate the fish trade aspect of this hobby. It is delicate. Does not begin to describe the condition of a lot of these fish that are getting shipped all over. Yeah, so in the future here, I'm still very much considering like looking at for folks that are taking down their aquarium and seeing what fish they're trying to rehome, and then quarantining those so they don't kill off all my existing fish, or finding local places that do active quarantining, of which in my case is close to zero. I can't think of a single. Okay, anybody in Northeast Ohio know of a store that does quarantine other than us that does it badly? Because I can't think of any off the top of my head. And we don't sell fish, guys. Like, that's not our thing. Never was. BRS had it for about an hour. Tropic Marine goes fast. Yeah, non-starter. Hamid, which one would you recommend? Reef Crystals or Fritz Pro? I've never used Fritz. Reef Crystals I used a long time ago. It's fine. It's kind of a thing. It's just a long time baseline. Like Reef Crystals, I'm sure is not impressing anybody, but it's probably better for our purposes in Instant Ocean, and it's available. Sammy31D says, Northeast Ohio here, and hell no. There you go. Like, we have our quarantine tanks here, and like I said, it's not even, oh, let's bring these things in and successfully keep them alive happily. No, the fish hate quarantine. It's more just so that we don't kill off all our existing fish. Let's see. Are there any consumer products that you would consider for monitoring calcium, alkaline, and magnesium without consistent testing? I'm really lazy and I don't want to test regularly. Not that I know of. No, not that I know of. I think that there's 2 things that have constant testing that are for those 3 things that are good. And I haven't used either of them. One of them is the Trident by Neptune Systems. The other one is Ion Director from GHL, and Ion Director is not out yet. And I don't know how good it is. I'd like to try it out. I thought you used HW salt. I don't know what HW salt is, so no. HW, what is HW? I should probably know this. HW, marine mix. Obviously no. We used to use a salt called Omega C's Reef Mix. Nobody uses it. It probably wasn't even ever that good, but it was very convenient for me to get. It was made locally. That company got bought by the company that owns It's bought by the company that owns Instant Ocean. So they no longer make their own salt. And that company, I'm not able to buy Instant Ocean / Reef crystals from, so I had to go elsewhere. Yeah. I kind of do wonder how much of an impact the salt makes, but there's only so much you can really do as far as like salt goes, though. That's the problem. It's not like steady supply is always going to be a concern. And sometimes I can't just gravitate to like the best performing thing. Sometimes there's just these other considerations that kind of trump everything. So when it comes to like monitoring our chemistry, one of the guys here is like pretty fastidious when it comes to testing. Like back in the day, to say I couldn't be bothered was a true understatement. But now we test a lot more frequently, and controllers are kind of getting better to the point where they're continuously testing some important parameters. So we right now have, on one of our systems, we have an alkatronic that tests for DKH, as well as a KH director from GHL. And it is nice to have that steady daily testing going on in the background. And about once a week, maybe even twice a week, we'll go ahead and test manually to see if there's any like weird deviations that have gone on as far as like our automated testing goes. And that's a nice thing to kind of keep track of, because for that purpose, alkalinity is the thing that's most likely to fluctuate the most. But I think as more testing technologies come into play, I think that I'd like to get all of our systems going on that schedule. So the only one that we really haven't messed with, well, we haven't messed with a lot of controllers, but we have several Neptune ones, but we don't have the Trident that tests for calcium, alkalinity, and magnesium. I think for a long time that they've had supply issues, so I never really actively looked for one. So Chris Cunningham, what do you use to test your water? Besides the controllers that I just mentioned, we use primarily Sailorfert test kits. I know that I think BRS in one of their videos had said that that Sailorfert is like really good for one parameter, less good for some of the others. Red Sea is really good for one parameter, less good for the others. So there wasn't like a across the board best brand of test kit. It was almost like there was, of the ones that you're interested in, there was like a different winner test kit for each one. And I don't remember exactly which ones that was, but across the board we use Sailorfert. And I'm sure that it's not the best for everyone, but that's kind of what we've gone with. Paul Hiller says, I've been using Red Sea Coral Pro and it's been really great. I've heard mixed things about that. I've heard either it's like really great or it's really not great. I would be comfortable with the performance of salt to be really vanilla. Like, what's that phrase about banking? Like, banking is supposed to be boring. If banking is resembling day trading, that's bad. Like, that's not a good sign. I don't want exciting salt. Like, I don't want exciting chemistry. I want super stable, super boring, super easy to acquire supply chain wise. I'm not looking for like some ultra niche, high performance rocket fuel here. I want some boring, consistent stuff. Please, that would be nice. Totally off topic of what we were just talking about. This right here is one of my favorite Micromusa. We do have like several rainbow varieties that are super awesome, but I have like a soft spot in my heart for this one because it actually has a really cool yellow fluorescence to it. This is one of the ones that really stands out amongst a field of Micromusa. I can always spot these guys. Just had to throw that out there. Dinoflagellate issues. Dinoflagellates are a weird one. We typically don't have a problem with those. The times that we've had an issue with them, it's really in two situations, bizarre situations. One of them was when the system itself was simply too clean, where there's nothing showing up with like nitrates or phosphates. And that's generally speaking when we initialize a new aquarium system. Frog in my throat. The second time that we had it was when one of our tanks just wasn't getting enough flow coming back from the sump. So it was just a very, 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 very low turnover tank. It did not like that and grew tons of dinoflagellates. But I think for most normal aquariums under normal conditions, they should be less of an issue. Yeah. Sometimes when it comes to a lot of like the testing sort of things, I kind of think that you can overthink things when a lot of times the solution for a lot of discrepancies in your testing parameters is going to be the same. It's going to be the same remedy. A lot of times that remedy is just to do a water change. There's not a lot of mystery to it. I think the only times where a simple water change isn't going to balance out your chemical issues is if the salt is chronically high or low in something. So, for example, if you're getting alkalinity rising out of control and it's because of your salt, doing more water changes is only exacerbating that problem. Or if something is super low, doing more water changes is again trending that in the wrong direction. But for most other things, if your makeup salt water is good, it'll kind of like asymptotically get you to the right place. So sometimes I think obsessive water chemistry testing might be, well, excessive overkill. But I think that if I were to give anybody some suggestion on that, knowing the numbers is better than not knowing the numbers, but everything can be taken to an extreme. I would say that as long as your salt isn't garbage tier, doing more aggressive water changes will probably get you the results that you're looking for. Tidal Gardens, SM7B in the house. Does anybody know what he's talking about, guys? Okay, so this is gonna send me off on another tangent, and I think I'm more or less caught up on chat, so I'm gonna go off. So people like to rip on the goofy names for corals. And I'm not in like the whole name game quite so much. There's coral names because people ask for names. That's one of the most like requested things. But it is curious that the marine segment of the aquarium hobby has decided to go with basically weed names for all their corals, like pink diamonds, like whatever, right? What's the name of this guy? Blue Raven, Blastomusa Merletti, right? They've gone with like the whole like, you know, like weed nicknames. But if you look at like the freshwater side of things, for their fish, they're all like numerical codes for like a particular Plecostomus catfish has a very specific code for that appearance. And it's weird how certain hobbies, like, so for example, you know what he just said, Tech Gear Talk just said, SM7B. It is a microphone. It is this microphone that you're hearing, the me talk into, is an SM7B. It's a very famous broadcasting podcast mic. It was used for some portions of Michael Jackson's Thriller. It has some history behind it, right? So I say SM7B, audio guys know exactly what I'm talking about. If I say 416, they know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a Sennheiser 416 shotgun mic from the 1970s, the Hollywood standard, right? And so like a watch, if I was to say I scored the watch of a lifetime, I got a 5711. A watch guy would know exactly that I'm talking about a Patek Philippe 5711 Nautilus, for example. But for us in the coral trade, we have Tangerine Dreams zoas. You know, I don't know where like certain things split off one way or another. And I guess that, like, to use the watch analogy, it's done both. So I could say a 5711, and people would in the watch community would know that I'm talking about a Patek Philippe. But at the same time, if I say a Hulk, the Rolex guys know that I'm talking about a green Rolex Submariner. Yeah, you know, so they also have, like, you know, their own nicknames. And I guess I'm always just curious as to like how the communities decide to go one way versus another. Has nothing to do with much else other than the whole naming thing. So what do I really feel when it comes to coral naming stuff? Sometimes it's super helpful. Like, for example, perfect timing. This is a radioactive dragonite zoa. Occasionally, you will see another vendor try to rename this, but pretty much across the board, the name for this particular coral is consistent, and it's helpful. I think it's less helpful when a lot of different people try to name the same thing something different. I think that's, and they do it, I'm assuming, to develop some sort of brand recognition for their company, but I think that's actually going in the opposite direction of where you want to be, what you want to be doing, because I would almost think that you'd want to use the name that's generally being looked for rather than one that's trying to be your stamp on something that already is pretty well stamped. The Goblins Fire Zoas, that might be a little bit fringe. I've heard of it before, but it's not super terribly common. But there's like certain zoas, like like Eagle Eyes. Like, immediately for 90% of you, that should have brought a mental picture of what I'm talking about. Now, if I were then to say, no, I'm not gonna call it an Eagle Eye, I'm gonna make up a brand new name for that to try to like get my foot in the door into the naming game, that's probably gonna do me more harm than good, because somebody out there that wants that exact coral is gonna do a Google search for Eagle Eye. And you know who's not gonna come up? This guy that was trying to sell that exact coral. So that's my take on it. I defer heavily to what might show up in a Google search. What are these guys? Fiji Hypercolors. This I am sure was not named by us, because I do know who named this one. And again, I would much rather somebody else name it, make it stick, and then go with that. And I also wonder, would it make sense for there to be some kind of like, some kind of named thing? I don't know. Okay, I'm now going to catch up with some chat. I feel like coral names are getting pot names, getting names like pot smoker gives her strains names. Yep, pretty much. Harkins 5711 is one of the nicest watches. And lol, damn, I'm getting schooled on high-end watches. Yeah, I'm just gonna stick with my Seiko. Peter T, one of my favorite watches is a Seiko. Okay, and I probably should have used that example. I have an SARB, a SARB 033, and that, to like most Seiko people, would know what I'm talking about. Peter, I did not know that you were into watches too, lol. I just scored an Altiplano. You know, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. I should know what that is, but I don't. Let me take a quick. Oh, it's a Piaget. Oh, very cool. Okay. Yeah. You know what? I am not up. Wow. Nice. I like it. I like it. I am not that familiar with Piaget. I mean, I know of the brand. I know of the brand, but it's because I'm like intimately familiar with like certain brands like Grand Seiko and stuff like that, because it's like I really like that, and to some degree like I know Cartier pretty well. I know like Jaeger-LeCoultre pretty well. I know Rolex. I don't even like Rolex, but I'm very familiar with their offerings. So like some of like the lesser known Swiss brands I'm not too familiar with. AMC Hammer Torch, hey from Germany, welcome. There's actually quite a few German watches that I like. I very much like the Erlanger and Sona and the Glashütte brands in Germany. Sorry about the watch diatribe there. Let's see. Peter T, Seiko Sarb 065. Nice. I own that watch as well. The cocktail time, the original JDM only cocktail time. I like it. Yes, that was actually the second serious automatic watch that I got. The first one I got was an Oris Artelier Skeleton, which I've worn a couple times on this channel. Let's see. Okay, brown jelly problems. Okay, brown jelly is really rough. That's basically like the Ebola of euthymia diseases. And it's very fast acting, very aggressive. So there's one of two things that might help. A very aggressive dip in iodine as a disinfectant, or there is this treatment called, oh, what is it? It's a potassium powder based thing. I think it's called, shoot, it's made by the people that make it's made by Polyp Lab. I think it's called like Reef Primer. Okay, it's a powder that you mix into water, and it's like a potassium salt thing, and that does a very good job of disinfecting, as well as like depestifying corals in that dip. And I've heard from a number of sources that it is effective against brown jelly. So that is something that you might want to try. It is pricey, but guess what? So are euthymia. Go for it. So there you go, Polyp Lab. You get a free commercial. Connor, I'm new to chalice corals. What would be your single most important tip for success with these things? Keep them away from one another. Keep them away from anything. They're highly aggressive. My piece isn't dying, but seems a little dull. So dull, you might be giving it too much light. They don't need a ton of light, but they do love to be fed. They do love to be fed. SBGA 221 Grand Seiko and my Nomos I wear every day. SBGA 221. So off the top of my head, that is going to be a spring drive movement. The 221, I think there's a picture in my mind, but the one that I want is the 211, the snowflake. Yeah, watch guys going off. Yeah. I came this close to going extremely over my vacation budget when I went to Kyoto a couple of years ago. I had it on my wrist, very, very close to pulling the trigger on my SBGA 211 Grand Seiko Snowflake. It is still a highly coveted piece by me. Having said that, this is one of my favorite this is my favorite CYPHASTREA period. We've kind of like developed a nice little collection of CYPHASTREA going, and this is our only piece that is a true branching variety. Now, when we first got it, I thought it was more like the Meteor color variety, but it turns out to be a lot more red and purple rather than like the normal like red and green. So I'll throw that out there too. Harkins coming in is like, I love my Invicta. The watch community hates Invicta, but you know what? I love my Invicta. There you go. Wear what you like. Don't see. That's the other thing about watches, which I low key love. Okay, if you're not wearing a Rolex, nobody knows what the hell you're wearing. And trust me when I say, there are 100 watch brands that are better than Rolex. They don't sell for as much, whatever, okay? But nobody cares about your watch until you find another watch guy, and he's gonna like push his girlfriend aside and be like, what is that on your wrist? And then you're gonna have a great conversation from that point forward. Unless it's a Rolex, and then you might have a stupid superficial conversation about your Rolexes. But like hardcore watch people, dude, if I saw somebody wearing a Reverso, we're about to be friends. Like right off the bat. It's like, well, yeah, you and I, we're gonna have a talk. If I see a Grand Seiko on your wrist, we're gonna have a good convo. So a 221 is also a type of snowflake. Oh, that's cool. I was just about to say like that we've acquired some really nice Goniopora. But I don't want to jinx it, because Goniopora is one of those things that you just like look at it the wrong way and then all of a sudden it's gone. So until we have like a lot of them that I can be like jinx proof, I'm not gonna say nothing. This one here, I mean, look at that. It's got this weird like side tentacle growth coming out of that main thing. I just noticed that. It's really cool. And for you guys that are looking for fast growing, like 5 years, so this is technically a Favites, we call it a 5 year. Not the most technically accurate sometimes here, but this is like a Favites. And of like the really nice pattern Favites and Favias, these guys are awesome and they're so fast growing. I think that we're probably going to be seeing like the price of these guys go down just because of like how many that we have. It was always one of the more expensive ones, but we've had such a great run of growing them that we're going to be making them a lot more accessible. Hopefully when I go to my LFS this week, I'll find a green Slimer. I can't find any in my local area and only seen once in person. Yeah, it's weird. They come in and out of availability. The green Slimer is an old school, and I mean old school acro that went a stretch of just not being available from import. So your main sources of them would be from aquaculture, and believe it or not, aquaculture really isn't so much of a thing. I think that you see a lot of high profile coral farms and you see a lot of independent sellers. But guys, there's a reason why you cannot buy an Amazeballs Goniopora online. It's not because people don't want them. It's not because you can't sell them for $600 to $1,000 each. It's because people really can't grow stuff as successfully as they hope. So green slimers, for whatever reason, became a little less available as a result. All right, this is the last coral, you guys. So gotta say thank you to you guys for attending. Gotta love the convo, and gotta love the watch talk. You know, nice little change of pace. Yeah, nobody ever says anything about my Grand Seiko, Piaget, or my Breguet, but if I wear a Rolex, they're gonna all of a sudden people are gonna be interested. Exactly. Like if you had that 5711 Nautilus, people would be like, "That's interesting." Little do they know. Little do they know that watch probably right this second sells for 100 grand. Okay, doesn't look like anything, but it's about 100 G's right now. They went out of circulation. We're in overtime, by the way. That's why we started over number one. That watch stopped getting made. It was already one of these watches that if you were able to buy it at retail for, let's say, $25,000, you'll never find one for retail, by the way, never. Unless you spent literally hundreds of thousands of dollars with Patek Philippe that year, no authorized dealer is going to sell it to you for retail. But let's say you do sell it for retail. You could literally flip that watch for between $75,000 to $100,000 within an hour of you purchasing that thing. That's how in demand those things. Like the luxury watch thing, like you thought that we were all crazy with our high priced corals. It's got nothing on high-end jewelry like watches. Like that market's nuts. Welcome to the weekend watch talk with Dan. Yeah, I should just do my own little watch show, except that I don't really have that many to show off. Not like Peter. Peter's got some baller watches, like a Breguet or a gold or I was about to say Goldman Sachs, Grand Seiko. Yeah, nice stuff. You know, put a Submariner in the bottom of your tank. I really should. I don't respect Rolex as much as other people. All right, guys. Again, thank you very much for attending. I am going to go eat a very early dinner. So enjoy the rest of your weekend. I will say a last quick thank you, though, to the Patreon and membership folks, YouTube member folks. So thank you so much, Bill Russell, Brandy Camp, Christopher Frame, Jeremy Altman, Alan Jackson, Chuck Admire, Don Bowman, Ernest Wallace Jr., Gene A. Van Voorst, Greg Zimmerman, Gwen Nicodemus, Harkins, thank you, Keith Singer, Kevin Cortez, Lisa Clow, Puddle Aquatics, Rebecca Hall, Reef Infidel, Rigoberto Rodriguez III, Ryan Kern, Sanano Mine, Scotty D, Skylar Korn, Sue Hemmons, The Classroom Reef, Thomas Tarrant, Tim Garner, and Trevor Joseph Overbeck on the Patreon side. And on the YouTube membership side, Jerry Albright, Justin Harden, Joseph Posada, Kev Andrews, Jeremy Place, Hal Scott, 328 Reef, Deidre Zuenner, and 2 Please Coral Reefs. Thank you guys. All right. Okie doke. Guys, I gotta go. But again, take care, and I'll probably see you guys. You know what? Next month, I will not see you next month. We do not have one scheduled for June, but we will pick things back up in July. All right, guys, take care.